Hello everyone, hope you're doing well and welcome here to another live stream with Beethoven. And so as always, or as lately in the live streams, start with 5 minutes welcoming you, explaining a little bit what the plan is, what we're going to do, and then from about 5 minutes start to play and start to dive into the subject of the live stream. So today it's about Beethoven, first sonata, still F minor, the Menuet. Going to see how that sounds on this piano. And about Beethoven, so this project is all embedded in the recording project that we're going to launch very soon. I have actually some exciting things to share with you here. This is the complete list overview of, so you can see it. Of all the pieces that I want to record, 60, and we can talk a little bit on that later when on the end of the live stream. But I'm really excited about this. I've been thinking on it for a long time and finally made up my mind what we are going to do. So all these practicing sessions, they are actually little snapshots in time of me practicing, preparing, and sharing some thoughts with you, some ideas and some things that I'm working on or just not know or not have finalized. So we will have also sessions where I just practice, like on the clavichord, where we do on Thursday evening now the Symphonia sessions. That's really diving into practicing sessions where I simply make fingerings and start practicing together with you. And so let me just say hello to a few people in the chat and then we'll dive right into the content of this live stream. So Jonathan is here. You made it finally live. That's great. Mr. Unknown. Mr. Unknown, good. German or English, that's another pronunciation. So Emmy is here. Hello to you. Great to have you. Genius of the Year. That must be great to have you. So, Andre is here. Livestream is working, Andre. But we'll touch some wood here to make sure it keeps working. Jonathan says, I'm hoping the symphonies are on that list. This is a list with the solo works, but I have some plans with the transcriptions as well. And at the end, of course, the end goal is to conduct the 9 symphonies with an orchestra. But that's for later, for a few years. That's the impossible project in my head. So like people of Tesla, they want to travel to Mars, knowing that it never will happen. But by having that projection of idea, everything else becomes much more feasible. So that's the thing. Azam is here. Greetings from Pakistan. That's great. Love the way you explain the things. That's great to read. Thank you for that. Joseph is here. Sina, great to see you here again, Sina. Dak is here as always, welcome. And then Verlenzius, that's a very nice name. Sounds Latin to me. So, other people will join. And as always, I hope you have a great time in the chat while I'm working really hard. So no, it's really nice to see that this community on the live streams is building. And actually many of you reach out to me to say how great you think it is. These live streams are back not only to hear me rambling about pieces, but also to have contact with each other. That's really a community that's being built. That's true, Doc. The future is unknown. But you have to project ideas. I think it seems ridiculous that I ever would be able to conduct an orchestra with the 9 symphonies of Beethoven. And it's not just to take an orchestra, hire an orchestra. It should be all people who are willing to devote time of their practicing time actually to really make this style like I'm doing on the keyboards now to their own, because it difference of tempo, and certainly this big of a difference of tempo as we are doing, and certainly with the symphonies, that comes with a different performance practice. That's all I can say about it. So Rastislav is here. Also always great to see you. And thank you for the review on Amazon. By the way, our CD of Pachelbel is finally on Amazon. So even if you didn't purchase it on Amazon, or you haven't purchased it at all, you can do us always a favor to go on Amazon. You can leave reviews. I have different categories on that. So only do that if you really think it's nice. And that would be awesome. Rostislav knows everything about that. He actually gave a lecture to me on our latest Patreon call, which was great. Okay, guys, so 5 minutes I see in the live stream. Let's talk a little bit on this Menuet here of Beethoven, the first sonata. I will play it, try to play it, because it's not finished yet. There are a lot of things that needs to be solved, and one of the things is the sound. I have played this on my clavichord, and in one way or another, this Menuet, not the other parts, perhaps the Adagio as well, but certainly not the Prestissimo, and the first movement you could say, well, on the clavichord it works great as well. At least if you take my tempo, it's no way you can play that on the clavichord so much faster. But the Menuet works great on the clavichord to have this. It's smaller as an instrument, but I don't know if it's that. I am practicing, and that's the thing we are going to try. Hope that will work during the live stream, to play it for you with the lid of the piano open as it is now. And as I'm practicing often just with the lid of the piano closed, and it is very nice actually when it closes. It's made for that. I can demonstrate that in a moment and see if you can hear the differences through the microphones, because microphones typically they capture sound in a different way than our ears. They have, of course, no imagination. They just take everything there is, and what's not there, they will not add to the sound. So typically when you close the lid of a piano or a clavichord, but certainly a piano, I think for a clavichord is different, but also there a lot of people, I typically don't play with the lid closed on the clavichord. I don't like it that much because I like to hear the details. But for a piano, it can be a very nice thing to cover up some details. And covering up, I don't mean by wrong notes or things in articulation. It's just, it seems to blend in a different way, and sometimes have the feeling that it blends much more. So I was thinking, why not try this live with you here? And we'll just see how it goes and how the microphones will capture that. So my plan was just to play it 2 times now for you. It's a good practice for me. And since it's also not too long of a piece, even not in double beat, so don't worry. And then I will close the lid of the piano. And by the way, that's the last point I make before I going to play. I am planning, don't think I'm not, but I'm planning to give you a detailed a video on the pianoforte where I take the action out and just show you every part. It has not been the time for that yet. It will come. So don't worry about that, because it's really an exciting piano to show to you. Okay, what I will do now is just mute my microphone here, and I will come in the chat, of course, at the end, certainly maybe during the practicing sessions as well, practicing session as well. We'll see about that. And Anya is in the chat. She's my wife, in case you wouldn't know. She's moderating the chat, and if I missed some of your questions, then she will come down the stairs and she will tell me, and so I can perhaps share my idea or share a response with you. So I will mute this microphone so that you only hear the 2 Neumanns. There we go. So as always, oh, now you hear my voice very distant, but I just play at the tempo that I have in mind, and then we check later with what is on the score. version 1. I'm going to close the lid of the piano now. And so let me know what your impressions are, because obviously this is something I cannot judge from here. And then we may decide just to leave the lid of the piano closed or not. Of course, the piano will sound a little bit softer. I won't touch the mixing console because you never know what happens during a live stream. Okay, there we go. That's me hitting the microphones. And now I close this like, let's see that I don't kill my metronome there. So, you see, it's really nicely made to fit. Yeah, Anya's there.
If you're talking, you use the other mic. It's too quiet.
Yeah, I know, I killed this microphone. Anya was there to say that my voice is really soft, but because I just muted that. So this is better. So now the piano is closed, and just let me know in the comment section what you think about the sound now compared to the piano open. And I will read it then. There is a delay of 30-40 seconds in the live stream, so you don't have to wait until I'm finished with playing to let me know what you think about the sound. I will read it afterwards. So let's just try. Okay, hope this made sense to you. I'm looking for your comments on the sound. Maybe there's not so much different. Yeah, John says the piano is a bit softer now, like the clavichord. Okay, a little different. Can't tell, Mr. Anongood says. Yeah, okay. So what I can read is there is not so much difference. Yeah. So my voice is, yeah, microphone is back up. Yeah. That is actually great to know. I will make some phrasal 14 ornaments sound great. That's great to hear. Yeah, we will talk about ornamentation in a minute. So if it's only a little bit softer, then I would suggest I leave it like now. I could rebalance it a little bit live. So shall I take the risk? I'm just muting the microphone and then I'm going to make a new balance, just turn up the volume for the piano a little bit. So do it live. That's actually a big difference. I think several dBs, in fact. That's on its own, that's an interesting experiment. So closing the lid, it must have an influence on the output of sound in decibels because it's massive oak veneered, so it's very heavy. But let's just leave it like now. So, okay. Anya, don't worry, everything was fine. I think the live stream is still on. We had so much technical problems last week, so everything is fine and it will stay just fine. Okay, lid closed of the piano. For recording purposes, it's not always the best because you will lose some upper tones and perhaps you can not hear that during the live stream, which is, of course, YouTube is compressing everything in a way that I even cannot understand and certainly not control. But I might, somewhere in the future, make some recordings with the lid open and with the lid closed. I mean, high quality recordings as a normal video on YouTube, and then perhaps you can tell the difference. So you will lose some upper tones that the ear is adjusting for, but the recording normally not. It will sound a little bit more like this. But anyway, I like playing like that oftentimes. Also a matter of tuning. The piano is changing again because we had some very nice days here in Belgium, which means that the clavichord doesn't respond to that too much. It's much more stable than the piano. The piano is rather stable, but even the ERA is reacting to that. But if you close the lid, of course, all those details, they're covered up a little bit. Okay. So I hope the tempo was not too much of a shock to you. I guess not, because I see a lot of smiles in the chat, so that is nice to see. For me, this tempo is now quite okay. Let's see what tempo I had, but at the beginning, I have to admit, honestly, it's if you're used to playing it faster, it is coming back from driving at the highway at a high speed, like in Germany you can. And then coming into a little village where you can drive 50 or even 30, that feels a little bit strange at the beginning because you lose this feel of speed, which is addictive. It feels great sometimes to drive just fast, you know. But it's after a while when you drive slowly again that you start seeing things that you would have lost otherwise. And that's what happens when you do these tempo exercises or just apply those tempi for your own practice. That's even better. That after a while you will start feeling more and more comfortable with it. You have to really get rid of that feeling that we all have. I mean, I also have I've been at conservatory 8 years, and of course I didn't play in double beat by then. was no way I could do that. Things developed in my mind as thoughts back then, but just finished I got my degree as everybody else. So by just playing these pieces and listening to those pieces and going to concerts and just like everybody else. So the music is in your head and you have to get past that barrier, because it is really a barrier. And if you just try these things out for one time, it definitely will not work. Certainly not if you're not open for the idea of really giving this a try. Then you're only looking for the things that don't work. And believe me, nothing will work if you come back from a faster tempo. But this Menuet, I typically played it a little bit faster than Czerny is indicating. And Moschles, by the way, is the same tempo. All 72 for the half note, dotted half note. In today's recordings, you will not find a lot who meet to match this tempo of Czerny. I was checking before, and like Richter and I don't know, I've checked a few of them. Barenboim, they have a tempo of around dotted half note 48 to 50, which is faster than I do, but way below what Czerny would have meant if it were single beat. Just interesting to see. There was one recording who matched the tempo was Pollini. Pollini plays, I think, the entire sonata in the tempi described as Czerny, even in the last movement, which is unbelievable how he can do that. So not many people can do that, and if you're not used to the same thing, if you're not used to that fast of a performance, you will have a shock as well. So I think that's really over the top. And the adagio, it just becomes a kind of, andante, a little bit on the surface of, well, nice, but gentle, but not with much deep. So, but other than that, you'll find a lot of recordings for this Menuet which are way below this metronome mark in single beat. And obviously not a lot who are exactly on the spot in double beat. That's of course the other thing. Let's see what my tempo was. So in single beat, I'm at 106 now, which is about Czerny in double beat. So Czerny has 72. And here we have also an example of this tactus iniqualis. So Czerny gives 72 for the whole bar, which in the double beat theory it's metrical, so you'll have two ticks for the unity of one. So you have one, tack. So if you conduct like this, what tactus iniqualis means is that back then in the times in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, in mensural notation, so to say, they had this circle, and I'm not a specialist in this. Lorenz Gardent has told me a lot about it, but I should definitely dive more into that. But one of the things that I didn't know during the make of those interviews, we have a playlist with interviews Lorenz Gardent, was that you have the tactus equalis, which is 1, 2, 1, 2 in this case, and when the like they call you have the binary time signatures, and you have the time signatures with 3. The English name escapes me for the moment, but you know what I mean, like 3/4 or just a 3. That they didn't want to lose the whole as 2 movements, so 1, 2, 1, 2, and so they went from a tactus equalis to a tactus iniqualis, which is 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. And you see a reflection of that in the way pendulums notations are made or metronome numbers are given. So obviously there is no way that the metronome can beat an equal. So you can play 3 against 2 because that's what it results in, but it feels not natural. Now, the tempo indications at the beginning of a piece, so really giving you the tempi as the composer, or in this case a pianist, things that the piece should be played in, like Moschles said, these are only for the beginning of the piece. I mean, you read a lot of times where people say, yeah, but Moschler said that the metronome numbers only count for the beginning. That's one of the main counter arguments for people who defend single beat. And I'm not going to lecture here on single beat, double beat. That's not my meaning, but I just want to give you a little bit of background and context. What he meant by that is that you take this tempo as a tempo indication, and then you close the metronome and you start playing, and then you have a little bit of fluctuations like every player has. Even if you don't want to play in a tempo rubato, you always will have, you will not be in sync with the metronome. That certainly applies for the tempo inequale. So if you take 72, you have 1, 2, 1, 2. You have, then I start counting only the second one, 1, 1, 1. And now I'm conducting an inequalis. Chang, chang, tang, tang, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm at 112. So that's about what Czerny writes. Tam, ti, dum, tam, pa, dum, ta, dum, pam, pa, dum, pam, pam. So all these metronome numbers and even this metrical way of writing them, it directly connects to the way of conducting, obviously. So that's something that makes this really practical. And he indicates this by a whole note, a half note, dotted half note, because the accent is so heavy on the ta-ram, 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 so if we continue this a little bit and look in detail in the score, where you can have signs where the composer, where it shows to me at least that the composer really thought from this tempo, like it's in single beat around 108 for the quarter note. You see a lot of accents on the third beat. Even with those little bows on 8 notes. I don't know if you can see that. I have to be careful with this score because this is an original first print of Czerny's Simrock. So details like this, I don't know if you can see that. I cannot focus now because autofocus is off. But things like this, yeah, yeah, pam. So you have a bow on 2 8 notes, which means a little accent on the first and definitely an articulation between the last 8th note and the first note of the next bar. You have also a lot of counter accents on 3, ti, yam, pam, or sudden, sforzando pianissimo, tayam, payam, pam, payam, pam. So all these things, trills also on quarter. So it has been thought, I think, from the perspective of a quarter note pulse. And yeah, you can debate this, of course, if that would be possible or not. Double as fast, listen to Pollini. It's really, it's a nice exercise to do that. But I don't think, maybe he can, I didn't count his trills here, how many trills he makes, but it will just be a double slag. So a turn that he makes, no way he can play in that tempo double as fast a trill yet. So it's up to him to decide what he wants to do. It's not up to me. There's Anja.
Jonathan asked which is the Moschler's tempo for the music.
It's the same. So Anja is just there to give a question of Jonathan. The Moschlers and Czerny are the same tempo here. It's interesting to compare both because they give metronome numbers independent from each other, and they really in line with each other as all the metronome marks of that period. 40 years, you see that similar notation gets similar metronome numbers. There was a tradition. People felt that or just could read the notation. It makes sense, by the way. So now I lost a little bit what I was saying. Oh yeah, so if you double the speed, it's up to Pollini to decide what he does with the trills. But if you play a turn, you don't play a trill, so it's not indicated, and that's fine. I mean, as I said often, it's not my goal to change your way of listening or listening habits or playing habits. This is just one of those little indicators that there is something going on, because you don't write a trill if you play in this tempo, which is 72 for the dotted half note, which is over 220 beats per minute in the quarter note. So then you have to play a trill, 4 notes at least, I think, in a tempo that goes for 220 on the quarter note. That's again, you can debate the possibility, but it's out of question that the trill doesn't make sense then. And so you have a lot of these things, so smaller things, sudden sforzando pianissimo, for which you have to take your time a little bit. And then you have, of course, this wonderful passage here. I'll show you that where Beethoven does something really revolutionary. I'm just looking at the computer for the light. It's here. Hope you can see that's not too small. But anyway, that's this passage here where... and so on. Well, it's without pedaling, and I think this piece needs to be played without. So you have to make finger legato, which is very well possible in this tempo. And you have 2 fingerings. The Beethoven fingering is always given. I think most modern editions give all the fingerings. If you have the Schenker edition, which is a very popular one still today, I'm playing from that, it's great. It's actually very fine. There you have the Beethoven fingerings. Czerny gives his own fingerings. It does that very rarely to correct Beethoven, but here he says it's more legato. I actually don't know. It's a minor detail, but again, a minor change I would say that he makes. But it's really interesting to look at both fingerings. But in any case, in a double as fast tempo, it really doesn't matter what kind of fingering you use. These details get completely lost, and the only way you get this passage legato is by pedaling. There is no other way, because otherwise it will sound legato. Now you can, of course, you have to lift your hand completely. So for instance, here you have 3-1, 4-1, 5-2, and then you have to leave the 5, go to the A. It's indicated, by the way, by a bow. So Beethoven wants to have an articulation gap, and certainly an accent on the next bar. So 5-1, 4-2, 5-1. Again, 5-1, 5-1. So technically, this is not legato, and that's what Czerny is talking about, because when Beethoven does 5-1, 5-1, so again, technically no legato, Czerny, of course, corrects that by 5-2, 4-1. And here he has 5-2, 4-1, 3-1. So what he does, he plays more the right side of your right hand. He makes those notes more legato. For Beethoven, this was not big of an issue. So that's an interesting thing to see. And it sounds as a ridiculously small detail, but it has an influence on the way of you play the piece in what tempo, because otherwise, as said, it doesn't make any sense. And secondly, it's just interesting to reflect on the differences there might be there between Beethoven and Czerny. Czerny publishes this in around 1840, later even, so there has been some time. And that's the fascinating thing, and also the difficult thing. You cannot say for Beethoven it is like that, and for Czerny it's like that. They're merging, of course, they had an influence on each other. But Czerny's life continued when Beethoven's life stopped. So he kept on developing, still with the idea of doing justice as much as he could to Beethoven. I'm convinced of that, but still that doesn't mean that he didn't change. And so it's hard even for you or for me as a musician to see how we develop and how we develop from what we are doing, what we did a year ago or 2 years ago, let alone if you don't have recordings. So that's really, really interesting to reflect about. For me, I think I enjoy those reflections a lot, because you can learn so much about it. So let's just go through the piece here again. And one of the things that I think is really important, again, accentuation is so key to everything. Accentuation and key and timing is key to so much in double beat. If you slower the tempi, you need to dive into the world of accentuation. And it's a little bit like in the Baroque music, where you hold notes a little bit longer. We talked about it in the last Patreon call. Was a word I didn't know. It's finger pedaling. It's like it's playing your notes over legato, what you do on the clavichord all the time, and on harpsichord as well. You do it in Beethoven's music also. So he starts with the staccato note, it's a stich, so it's not a dot, it's a little line. There's a lot of debate whether the stich, as they call it in German, is more accentuated than just the staccato, but every author has his own things. And for Beethoven, he was really hard on his publishers to have a dot or a stich, so might have a difference for him, but I mean, from his scores and his manuscripts, it's almost, you cannot tell. So there are a lot of misprints in those, and still today, it's how are you supposed to figure out if it is a dot or just a little stich in Beethoven's handwriting? I mean, that's impossible. But for Czerny and his pianoforte school, he makes a small distinction, but not overall. It's not consistent in that, so it's not a really, really big difference, I would say. So play the notes shorter and a little bit of accent on 3. Tum, pa, dum, pum. So here also, he doesn't give an accent on the first beat, which I think is a little strange, but I come from the clavichord. I mean, I try to think like someone who's born in the 18th century, which is of course ridiculous because I wasn't. But I would expect here, it's not like that. So he skips one accent, at least one articulation accent, and so I'm thinking maybe I should give a little more accent in dynamics. So very pronounced C, ta, tum, pum, pum. Once you hear that C, you want to stay there. It's so nice. Tum, pum, pum, pum. And now give a little bit of articulation here. Tum, pa, dum. Not too much. Now I have to release this note much better, much more careful, so that it gently leads to the new note. So if you just make it short, it doesn't work. But if you release softly, like on the clavichord, it works. Now the timing is really difficult. It's very important, I think, to make this zoiser, to make this so I have this accent and you see how you differentiate this bar by doing that. So you get constantly different accents, different rhythms, which totally get lost if you play it in double as fast. Double speed, actually. That would be a nice name for single beat, double speed tempo. Anyway, so it's not to bash those performances, it's of course not. But forte. Now you have this repeated C, what we had in the left hand and the top voice. So that's how important for Beethoven this is. Should keep an eye on my tempo. That's something I always do. If you have, let's not give you my private number here of my phone. If you practice and you think about this, just stick to your tempo, whatever tempo you have, and check it. It's okay. Forte. if you noticed that I missed one of the E flats here. It's because my finger was not released from the key. And so you sometimes hear Viennese actions of pianos are fast. That's not true. It's annoyingly slowly. They have a fast attack. So you press a note and you have immediately sound. I mean, compared to an Erard or a Stein, we talk about microseconds, of course, but that's boof, you have the sound. It's like on the clavichord. But then the hammer, which is really, really, really light, needs to fall down with its own weight, and it needs to come back fully, because otherwise you don't have sound. Nothing happens, and it's really to the top, and then press again. So, yeah, just mentioning that. You don't have a staccato mark, but I still think yum pom. Piano, but a little bit of accent. Yum pom. Forzando. And on these pianos, as on the clavichord, you can really give a forzando without thinking it's too loud. Well, you can play it too loud. You know what I mean. It's just made for these kind of pianos. That's a big jump. So to make these notes feel connected, you have to release the F. So this note still gently, because otherwise it will just be a staccato note. It's like some boom. That's not ti-yum pom, ta-yum pom. So there is no escape from waiting a little bit. Again, those things are little tempo indications for me that you cannot overplay this, because then this detail will be lost forever. Ta-yum tom, ta-yum pom. And then the difficulty again is also for the left hand here to make sound. Tom, pom, pom. Not to overpower the right hand. Which is much easier if we just could release the notes a little bit. So there is no bow here. C, D flat. Does that mean that it's not entirely meant to be played legato? I don't know. It would facilitate things when it wasn't. So then it would sound like this. Which actually works. So you have legato here. So it might sound as if I'm just talking about details that are really not important, but that's the way I work, certainly with the piece that I feel needs so much more three-dimensional context to present to you. I'm always looking to these details, trying things out. So let's do it again. There's a response, Tom, ti-ram, question, or statement actually. Affirmation. The F is an affirmation. Okay, so the F is connected to, is binding these two figures. So this figure together, but they have a relation as well. And then. So you and the difficulty now is you have an accent on 2. There's no escape on that, because you have in the right hand this left hand. So in terms of sound, this is really difficult, because what kind of dynamic should you attach to that? You cannot play every note accentuated. So tom, pom. So definitely an accent on the first note, which is here, ta-dam. But the difficulty then is the release of that note. While you're releasing the right hand, you have to give the accent on the left hand. That's like playing Bach, a polyphonic fugue. Let's try that. It's not easy. So when people sometimes, you read that also in the comments, say, well, yeah, that's all easy, okay, it's a practicing tempo and blah, blah, blah. Well, this is really ridiculously difficult, which you don't need to develop the skills if you play it so fast, because nobody will hear that counter accent anymore. It's just going in one big rain of notes, so you're pouring it out. So, but when you play in this tempo, you really need to build that accentuation pattern. Right hand accent on 1, release on 2, left hand accent on 2, release on 3, which 3, by the way, needs to have an update for the next part. And he wants to have this kind of difference because he writes forzando and then pianissimo. And so this is falling really still almost, and then the contrast, I will play it again, and then the contrast with the fortissimo is really strong. So let's try this. Here is really strong and powerful, and I give the accents on 3 and 1 by then dynamics. Tam, pianissimo. And then there is a story that is developing. Listen, this is really not right. I mean, I need to develop this. This needs to feel much more natural, that I don't have to think about it. But I think this is the way this piece can be developed. All these micro accents, rhythms, silences, rests, relationships between right hand, left hand notes. And so you get this huge building now suddenly, instead of just a menuet that you play with actually only one. If you play that fast as Polini, you have only one mood, I would say, one affect, so one storyline. It becomes a little bit boring, in my opinion. So, and then you have the trio, which is just telling the story in a different way. It's like going to another room, another universe. First, C, it doesn't have a bow, and normally I would say I play it legato, but here is a bow added. So I think these are really legato bows. So jump, make it articulation, jump. Cello, eh? Cha, cha, cha. So also make an ending to that. Sorry. Next. So it's way less complicated than the first, so the minuet itself. So, and then you have to repeat the minuet again, and then the question was also raised, I think, by Jonathan, what to do about ornamentation. Yeah, typically if I play this on a concert, I add some variations like something like that also here. If I would do that on a recording, I don't know yet, because Czerny writes that if you play Beethoven, stick to the score. And I think that's really true for later works, where also Beethoven, he was in a transition period, you know. If Clementi was writing a sonata in 1780, I don't think he had a long distant future in mind where people would still play his music in 200 years. So this was also kind of score that was for his own use, and it was published, of course, later. So also he was a kind of bridge figure. Mozart, I think he starts to see himself writing music that will last a longer time. And also there we are in a period where publications became available for people. It's only C.P.E. Bach in the 60s. Actually, in the late 50s, we have made some videos on C.P.E. Bach. You can find them. So I quit that series a few years ago. So C.P.E. Bach in Pieces, where I described also the printing process became in the second half of the 18th century so much more, I would say, democratized. Well, that's doesn't actually work. Cheaper, so available for more people. So here you have with Beethoven, was really on the on a period where printing music was something that was very common, and he develops a style in which an editing style in which he added a lot of things. And you can say for his music later, I wouldn't know which sonata or date exactly, but he made the transition to the finished score, really the published score, the finalized score. I don't think that applies to Haydn or to Clementi or to other persons of that time, also not Mozart, although he elaborated his music, his sonatas so incredibly gorgeous. I mean, adding ornaments that it's hard to compete with that. But you also have with Mozart's music parts and movements that need some embellishments. And here, yeah, it's still in the 18th century, 1793, 94. So I think stylistically, people wouldn't be surprised at the time that you would add some ornamentation there. But again, we live in a different time. People have expectations. So for recording, I don't know what I would do. Because, yeah, you come in a world where you act as being some of people back then, but in fact you're not. You never will be in the context where you create those things and by definition are authentic, whatever that means. In performance practice, authentic sound. So the sound of a piano is an authentic voice of the past. That was the reason why I came up with the name authentic sound. Also the clavichord was a sound, actually a voice that wasn't heard much. So that's the only thing we can try to reconstruct objectively. Metronome marks are a little bit the same, even perhaps even more authentic because you cannot change them. The reference on the metronome is still the same as 200 years ago. This piano has been restored, that's a new clavichord, and even if it's not restored, an old instrument always have these scarves of the age, of the signs of the age. So it's hard, but every day we are distancing ourselves from that period. So adding ornaments, well, make the decision, I think. And don't feel ashamed if you don't have an answer to people say, why are you adding ornaments? That's not allowed. Well, who can tell? So, well, I hope this was a nice session for you. And I enjoyed it a lot. I was talking a lot more perhaps than last sessions, but what happens actually, it seems as if I figured this all out from up front, but that's not the case. I'm often doubting and struggling a little bit to find the real definition of these pieces, like this Menuet. I could play it, of course, but now going through this with you, I'm so much more focused. I'm talking a bit to myself and to you, I hope, and developing, also sharpening my thoughts. So these live sessions really, really are great. So I always thank you for being here, but that's really meant from the bottom of my heart. Okay. If you have questions now, I will have a look on the chat. And John is always there, is also a moderator. He is very much aware of everything that goes into, is related to historical keyboards, and there might be some others as well that I don't know about. So talking about the Beethoven project, here is again the list. Let me just share that for you who are still here. I'm looking on the screen to make sure that everything is on the screen. So in 2 words, I will come back to that on the channel in just regular videos, but just give you an introduction. This is a list of 60 solo works by Beethoven. And I started again from Czerny. Well, we are not married to say that, but Czerny is such an important voice in the music of Beethoven. Actually, almost totally absent in that regard. To really take him serious, but he was a wonderful teacher, and I thought, well, why not starting with the list he gives in his opus 500 of Beethoven works, and he makes a distinction between important works and the works that are in his eyes interesting but not gone to his big works. And those are not very many. There are a few variations. He leaves out 2 variations, that on Rule Britannica and on the English hymn, so to say, the British hymn, which I think are great variations, so I've inserted them. But all in one, you come into 60 works, and that's a list. I made timings, obviously, according to Czerny and Beethoven, because I haven't played all the works, of course not, so that I could come up with a kind of division of, well, CD programs, because that's the first focus. It will be very, very hard to produce vinyl discs because duration, that's the thing, but that's for later. First focus on the CDs. And so I thought, what could be better than also following Czerny there, where he says, well, to learn Beethoven, you have to start with his first sonata and play through them. By the way, Czerny gives 29 sonatas, not 32. So the opus 49, the 2 sonatas, and the opus 79 are sonatines in his eyes, as was in Beethoven's eyes. Beethoven didn't like the idea of having them inserted as sonatas, but editors kept doing that because the sonata probably sold for more money. So, and I thought, why not keeping that chronological order? Kind of, certainly for the sonatas. So I made a division in sonatas of 29 sonatas with the sonatinas needed 29 sonatas chronologically, and then added to those sonatas a little bit of works around that period. So you have more or less a chronological order of now 21 CDs that will go in 7 boxes of 3. And as for now, with an end date of November 2023. So that's a little bit more than 4 years. It should be possible if things develop like as they are developing now. Then you have the Kurfürsten sonatas, which are his first work, 1783, which he wanted to have published in 1822. He actually lied a little bit about his date of birth then to make him sound younger. So, but 1822 is really at the end of his life. I mean, he was, you know. And so you cannot leave them out, I think, from a complete recording session. They are nice, there's nice music, astonishing for a 12-year-old or 13-year-old boy, actually. But to start the series with the CD, with those 3, because there are pieces of 20 minutes each, was a little bit too light. So I decided to make a CD recording as a bonus. So people who would sign in for the complete series would get this for free as a bonus. But that's in developing. Okay. Jonathan, what pieces are you doing next? I was thinking on just following the Beethoven order and see what I can come up with. I cannot perhaps keep this doing every week a different movement. We can come back to some earlier pieces that we did, just practicing sessions, excuse me, as we do at the clavichord. But I was thinking just following that order. Also doing some clavichord pieces on Beethoven, because that's another thing I decided to have the 3 instruments involved, the Frenzel, the Fritz pianoforte that's about to come, and the clavichord. Because the variations that are written before 1800, they sound marvelous at the clavichord, and they feel a little bit lost at the piano. Perhaps a 5-octave piano would do better, but that's something I don't have. And then you are in the world very close to the clavichord. So I thought it was a cool idea to not only make a difference in tempi, but also in instrument choice by including the clavichord. So might be doing some sessions at the clavichord as well. Joseph Zarur. Wim, you said one time that skipping fingers or making the hand smaller is not that good, but it's still better than making bigger. And well, yeah, so it's a standard position to have this closed hand position, so to say, where you don't open your hand like this. But of course, if you play octaves or complex chords, you have to do that. And it starts to change very much in Beethoven's time, even in Bach's time. I mean, it's a standard position, but you come back to that position as much as you can. However, if you play really legato in cantabile lines, you sometimes just want to make the connection, but then always with the wrist. Never do that without using this turning of the wrist. I made some videos on that. It's also a big part of my keyboard course. The movement of the wrist, that's really that's the kingmaker of musical expression at the clavichord and at any keyboard. So it's a complicated issue, but that's still for Moscheles, this was his basic hand position. He writes somewhere that he has much difficulties with playing Chopin because of the grips that he has to take. And so it's interesting. Hope that answers a little bit your question. Beethoven's G asks, can you elaborate on the cadence at the trio, which seems like a shortcut to resolve a phrase? Very tricky. You mean of the Menuet, I think, at the trio. Yeah, it's a little bit with humor now, I think. It's incredible how much less dramatic, I mean romantic dramatic, his music becomes in these tempos, much lighter and much friendlier and much dramatic in a very pure sense, not always thunderstorm and big scenes, but really human emotions. And also here I think it's just pom pom, and then the opening contrast is so much bigger than. So I think he builds up the contrast. I hope that answers a little bit your question. Doc, it's really ambitious. Well, it's actually not so ambitious. I mean, it's just 60 works. I've recorded almost 200 now for YouTube, and the number is stuck a little bit because I still didn't find the balance between clavichord and pianoforte. There are so many pieces waiting to be recorded. It's just being consistent, I think. 3 pages a day, and then in 4 years everything has been recorded. Well, let's hope, because it's a challenging task. But I'm really excited about it. James Lombana, and I did listen a lot after all, that's why I'm here. Thanks for your hard work, you're welcome. The red blocks are a CD. Oh, that's Anya. Yeah, that's true. 21. I like that number. I don't know if it has a special meaning. 7 times 3 or 3 times 7 times 3, I don't know. Andre, I've just purchased a vinyl box of all Mozart piano concertos from the 70s. The amount of work it must have taken to make it, yes. Certainly to record it and edit it analog, they were fabulous in doing that. But that's out of the question. And also not for the Bach partitas. We digitized everything and made the editing digital. It would require triple as much tape that we had. Always we used 19 tapes for the Bach partitas. I forgot about the price, but they're not so cheap. It's about 30 euros each. So triple that, because you need to make a copy first with the second machine that is in excellent quality as the first one, because you'll lose quality a little bit. That's not a big problem with these machines. But then once you've done the editing, you will lose all. You cannot edit from your master tape because you lose everything. And once the editing is done, you'll need to copy it again, because you cannot risk sending it to the master engineer to have all these, where you make the cuts. It's incredibly much work. So for us, we're too small for that. I mean, adding the tape recorder it's a big investment, and also challenging to make those recording works well. For the piano, we haven't tried that yet. That's coming up. But it's great to know that you are purchasing vinyl records. It's something that also for classical music is hanging in the air, I think. And so we will not skip the idea of making vinyl productions for the Beethoven fully, but we have to develop as a brand and as a business, so to say, to really be sure that there is a market for that. We cannot keep refinancing it, everything. Though the Pachelbel worked fine. We'll see I will come back for the Bach partitas, what we're going to do. Okay. Great to see that you're excited about it. So a lot of these practicing sessions will revolve around the Beethoven, and I will force myself to do some Bach, because that's something, and in between Mozart or plans, I mean, side projects. Can't wait to hear the opus Sonata and double beat. That's simply unbelievable. I have prepared that a little bit on the ERR, but not on the pianoforte a little bit. There the pedaling becomes really tricky, and you might think that you add a lot of more pedal to those later works. I mean, opus Sonata is what date? I could look here. Might be interesting to know. The opus Sonata is opus 57. It's 1805. So it's past clavichord time, certainly, and it's a little bit. It's 5.5 octaves. I should watch. It's not written here. So it's definitely for another type of piano than the Walter of the 90s, but still close to that sound. But if you see Van Bülow even, not adding a lot of pedaling, and he adds everything that he wants to add is there in the score. You cannot say that Van Bülow, who played on a different type of instrument, even an later instrument that I would think needs a lot more pedaling, still he doesn't add a lot. And so it's hard. I come back to that. So André writes, I also got Bach, Matthäus, Johann. Okay, yeah. You okay? Yeah, the Christmas oratorio from 50s, Thomas Cantors in the same lot. Listen to that. I have a lot of those. Günther Ramin and Eugene Jochem, I believe. There is another guy who just had a very short period there, but beautiful. I mean, yeah, they play differently, but those tempi often are, I think, very close to historical ones. So my idea is you have in the 1840s, 30s, you have this race of tempo. Tempo went very fast. It's documented. So if people say it's not documented, I mean, if you read everything, it's there. And so it stayed on a very high level. And then in the 20th century, when it started looking back, they said, oh my God, we are just so close from the metronome mark. So we have to speed up again, which of course never happened, because that's in many cases not possible. But for Baroque music, you had the Thomas Cantor, they had a tradition. And if you hear those recordings of Günther Ramin, it's sometimes astonishing. Even von Karajan, in some cases, with his Brandenburg concertos, some movements are so slow, but they are so enjoyable in a way that even I am surprised. And so what you see now in historically informed performance practice, I think in general, is that Baroque tempi are going up in the same way as that in 1830 people went to the sky with their tempi. And it's something that worries me, because, yeah, still you hear those great Baroque pieces in such a tempo already that yeah. Okay. Super excited for the session. Thank you for doing this, Brendel says. Great. Anya writes, I have 2 girls who are hungry. That's actually written for me. So this is a sign we have to... Okay, it's 1 hour 13, so to close the session. Anya, James Lumbana, I'm aware that Anya's your right hand in all your endeavors. Does she also play an instrument? No, she doesn't. But we work as a team here. Yeah, it's not always easy. I mean, because there are a lot of challenges that we have to deal with. But she's doing great things for me. Furtwängler famously said about Toscanini's Beethoven, damn timekeeper. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thanks for being here. Hope you enjoyed the session. Next Monday, I think there will be another one. I've not announced it yet, but you'll see it pop up in your feed on YouTube or on the home page of our channel. Thank you also for your support, for being here, for the patrons. Shouldn't forget that because they are a big part of what we are doing. And if you want to support us a little bit, there is a link in the description box. Just from $1 a month, we are 85 patrons now. But imagine, of the 18,500 subscribers, we would have just 10% of people donating $1 a month. We could really make this almost as a full-time business. So just saying. Anyway, thank you for being here, and we see each other soon again. Bye.